Well, Um, this is a chat mainly about the Hero System RPG or Champions RPG, depending on what you know it by. I'm mainly discussing rules and situations and character builds and things like that. This is not a game itself. I'm just not that good about putting together neat maps and everything else to make it look pretty to have y'all join in with my little group that's currently playing with me. That said, this is 5th edition Hero System rules. Hello, Wondergoon. Glad you could join us. And let's see, what else should I mention? Oh, yes, and I also, for building builds, character builds and the like, I use the Hero Designer 6 software, which, if you get into Hero System, I really do recommend that you look into getting it as well. It just streamlines things so much as far as building bases, AIs, computer systems, characters, etc. So, with that in mind, let's delve in. And as the title of this one says, I'm going to be starting a whole series, I guess, one could say, on what are known as the stop signs. If you notice and have noticed in the past videos, there are. Oh, yes, Wonder Goom is pointing out that this software is available at herogames.com. So, go check it out. It's a wonderful system. I highly recommend it. It can be anything. So, how can it go wrong? Okay, so where was I? Oh, yes. So I'm going to do a series on these powers and advantages and so forth that have these stop signs or these yield signs next to them. Maybe all of them, maybe not. But they have those symbols there for a reason. The stop signs are powers that GMs are honestly recommended that they may not want to use. There's something about them that can unbalance the system very, very easily if you're not on your toes and really watching what's going on. The yield signs are potentially unbalancing. Now, I'm saying this, and I'll tell you up front, little old normal attack energy blast down here, the standard attack power for a superhero game, can become unbalanced if you don't set appropriate limits to it as a GM. So, um, everything about this system is a judgment call, but the stop sign powers, especially, are advantages, really stand the chance of putting something in your game you don't want. Um, So it's my opinion that I'm going to start trying to cover some of those starting tonight with the advantage called usable by others. Um, and I'm going to start by pointing out where it starts. I mentioned in my last stream a character I once put together called the Journeyman. And what the Journeyman did was is I used all sorts of movement powers like flight, tunneling, teleportation, and put usable by others on at least a portion of them. Okay, so let's take a look at flight. All right. It's a nice little power. You spend 2 character points to get 1 game inch of flight. 1 game inch, again, is 2 meters of real space. So um, it's a fairly cheap power. It costs the same as running, to be honest. And the character point cost usually reflects the in game usefulness or capability of the power. So flight is a fairly useful power. I could argue that it might be better than running, but running is more commonly used, so I can see why they are comparably priced. So let's go ahead and run it up, and let's give 10 inches or 20 meters of flight. This would be 20 meters, 10 inches. Let's go ahead and just call them game inches. 10 inches of flight per your action in a combat scenario. So now let's go ahead and do the modifier. And as you can see, there's quite a few of those stop sign modifiers on these things. And sooner or later, I'll get around to looking at all of them with you. But tonight's usable on others or usable by others. I use them interchangeably because they have, as you see, a pull down here, and it can be usable by other, usable simultaneously, or usable as an attack. All right, usable by other means that your power is one that you can grant, you can give to someone else. They now can use it. They control it. It is under their conscious control until you take it back. Now, you can be an utter expletive deleted here and take, if it's this flight, you could take it back while they're in the middle of the air. But that would be kind of dastardly, and we'll get into a little bit more on that in a little bit. I mean, they could just reject taking the power. But usable by other means you can grant this power to one other character, one other individual. So that's not too bad, and it's reflected by the level of advantage it is. It is only a 1/4 advantage. So it's an advantage that you can give it to someone else, but it's still only usable by one person at a time. So that's not too bad. That's definitely not what the stop sign is there for. But this next one, usable simultaneously, that's a +1/2. But I can also put on another +1/4 advantage to it and get ×2 the number of targets. So now 2 people can be granted the use of this power or ability, or 4, or 8, or 16, or 32. And all of them can use it at once simultaneously at the same time. So you can see where this starts getting into abuse territory, because now 32 people plus the owner of 32 people total can now use this flight power. All right. Now, you do have to do some things as well on that. It's now fairly expensive power, because it's 55 active points, because it's usable by 32 others is +1 3/4 advantage. Okay. But you would need to also do something like, let's see, area of effect. And now you can grant it to up to 32 people within the radius area effect of this power. It's now up to 80 active points. But let's look at what that radius is. So we've got a 12-inch radius. Everybody within 24 meters of you up to 32 people, will now be granted flight. Now, why might that have a stop sign next to it? Wondergoon, I'm going to throw out a question to you. Would you allow this power in your game? Even though each of those 32 people are paying the 8 endurance each. And he puts in the correct answer, no. So this is part of why there's a stop sign next to this advantage. Okay? It can quickly and easily start unbalancing the game. And I'll show a more reasonable use of this one in just a moment. But I'm using the Journeyman as an example in this flight, and want to get the 2 reasons why it's a stop sign out of the way first. Okay? So let's take the area effect and the usable simultaneously off. And Wondergoon, you're saying, well, in certain circumstances, I might, if the player is playing a Green Lantern type character. That's a very good point. But I would ask, is he granting the flight, or is he just enabling people and it's still under his control? Because I can also, and I will point this out, there's another way of handling that. So, like almost everything in Champions, there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to handle a situation. So I'll also be bringing up what might be the other scenario for Green Lantern being able to let other people fly besides just himself. So let's go back and let's delete the flight. Let's just do it the easy way. So now let's use the other option on our usable by others, or usable on others. And let's do usable as an attack. Okay, this is a +1 advantage. Now, to really make it useful, you also need to use this advantage, ranged. But now, because when you put usable as an attack on it, it is now a touch attack. You have to be within touch range of the individual and touch them to make the attack roll. But that's exactly what this advantage allows you to do, is that you can now make an attack roll to grant people flight. Only you're in control of the flight. So you can fly them up in the air and turn it off, or you can fly them into a brick wall, or something to that effect. It is now usable as an attack, and I've now played it ranged. So if you're within my line of sight, I have to take range penalties for it. But if you're within my line of sight, I can grant you power of flight that I control. I am in complete and total control over it. I do whatever I want with you. Okay? So right there, we're already talking about a non-standard attack power that is pretty potent, because you can make somebody just go where you want to go. And you can do this on any power. You could do this on running. Now, the downside of doing this on a power is that you must list out a set of conditions that will negate it. In other words, say, for instance, if they have flight powers themselves, this won't work. This attack won't work on them. If they have power, but that's not really common, so that won't work by itself. But you could throw on, or if they have power defense, which is a defensive power that they could have. I would still argue that that's not too common, but that's getting beside the point. You do have to list out a common set of defenses that will negate the power and render it inoperable. Okay, so that's back into, well, that doesn't sound too bad. We'll get to this. The other bad part about this is this is actually doable by another power. There is absolutely no reason to allow this flight with this set of advantages on it, the usable as an attack and usable as ranged. Why am I saying that? Because there's a nice power down here called telekinesis, which essentially gives you ranged strength. So you can sit here and buy up, let's say, 35 strength with telekinesis, and you can now pick things up with your telekinesis and fly them around. So why do you need this 10 inches of flight range usable as an attack when telekinesis does the same thing? You can now still slam them into walls. You can still lift them up into the air and then let them fall and things like that. So bottom line, this flight power as an attack really circumvents needing to use telekinesis. So as a GM, you should be looking at it and going, I'm not going to allow that. You need to buy this instead. All right? So there's that aspect of the stop sign for it. But here's the other one. Yes, I still want to delete that power. Here's another nice little movement power called tunneling. Bottom line, it allows you to dig into materials and tunnel through them like Earth. So let's add 10 inches onto that. And now this, you can burrow through 10 inches, so 20 meters, through up to 10 defense material. So we're talking concrete. You could burrow 10 inches, 20 meters through concrete with no problem. Okay? You can add some defense to it so that you can tunnel through some more. You can make it where the tunnel fills in behind you. You don't leave a gaping hole in the target material that you're tunneling through. And so now we're already at a pretty buff power, but I'm going to take that off. And we're still 60 active points. This is a pretty tough, pretty buff power here. But let's go ahead and make it usable as an attack. All right. Now, number one, right off the bat, That active point cost of 120 points should have any GM of superhero or any other type of campaign going, no. That is, I'll put it this way. I use yeah, Wonder Goon is no, no, no. Both he and I think, use about a 90 active point cap on powers. And there's a reason for that. If you can't do it in 90 active points for a comic book style character, you really probably don't need to do it. This is definitely in that case. Okay, well, let's take it down to 5 inches. That's still 10 meters, and it's below the 90 active point cap. Okay, and in fact, let's come back over here and add, so I don't have to touch the person, let's add ranged back to it. It's still under the 90 active point cap. So now if I can see you, I take my ranged penalties, and I can give you tunneling that I control. So I can have you burrow down into the ground at 10 meters per action, per my action at that, and there's no tunnel leading back to the surface. It's filled in. Yeah, I hope you have tunneling to get back out of that, because otherwise I just buried you. And there's not anything you can do about it unless you have one of the common things that will turn it off and make it where I can't give you this tunneling. Do you understand why this particular advantage has a stop sign out beside it? It can very readily, very easily become something you just don't want in your game. I mean, imagine all of your villains that don't meet the criteria of having the defense just suddenly being entombed every combat. Because that's what this power sets up, is that the player could entomb every villain that you ever come up with that doesn't have the set of criteria to not allow the power to affect them in the first place. Again, this is why there's a stop sign there. The potential for abuse is very, very, very high with this particular advantage. All right, so we've pretty well covered now in 17 minutes why you might want to eyeball any power that has got this advantage slapped on it. Now, I will say it does cost 9 endurance per action to make them tunnel like this, but that's not really a limitation. So Wonder Goon puts in, for the record, I have an 80 active point limit on hit on powers with the following caveats. Typical range may be higher or lower depending on the concept and the power. Limit is per power and doesn't automatically cap elemental control or multi-power active points. 160 active points is the absolute limit allowed in power frameworks, and 80 is the absolute limit of active points a PC can use, even if it is in a framework with a much higher reserve, subject to the damage class limits. See note 4. A lot of that probably made no sense to a lot of you, but the bottom line is he does allow for some leeway, some room on this. No problem about the wall of text. But it's under very rigidly controlled and confined circumstances. So he sets it at, let's see, what was it? 80 active points, whereas I usually would go up to 90. And there's some flex in that, but generally speaking, if you can't get it done in 90 active points, you probably don't need to be doing it unless we're doing Guardians of the Galaxy type level superheroes. And I'm not talking about the Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm talking about literal people who are guarding the galaxy. Because then they're facing, villains that can wipe out the galaxy. So, such a power might be needed. That said, what might be an appropriate use for one of these powers or abilities? Well, I recently, because I'm running a fantasy hero game, I recently gave a priest character a spell that essentially gave a combat skill level, all combat, and I put usable on others, usable simultaneously, and I think I gave her 32 people on it, and area of effect. I didn't double the radius, and I put some limitations on it, but let's look at this without the limitations first. So this is +1 combat level, so they can use it as OCV, DCV, or to add damage to their attacks. Although one level isn't going to do much for you on that regard. And everybody, oops, let's edit it because it should be area of effect radius. And so everyone within 4 meters of this character, up to 64 people at once. That shouldn't be the case either. Let's edit that. Up to 32 people at once were granted this +1 combat level. This then is a 28 active points, so it's not that potent a power, and it essentially just gives them a little better chance to hit or to defend themselves if they're within the radius of the power. So while it's usable up to 32 people, this isn't going to destroy a game. Whereas that tunneling and every villain goes bye-bye and is entombed can. So there's a reason the power is left there, the advantage is left there, because there are legitimate uses for it that aren't going to be game-shattering, game-breaking. But at the same time, you've got to, as a GM, be watching out for it. And you, as a player, should not be trying to take advantage of this sort of thing. That said, yeah, we've all been there. I, like I said, made the journeyman and had some of these abilities on it that should have been no-nos. But we were young and learning the system. That's why I'm making these streams, is because I'm trying to get into things that shouldn't be done. So there's an example of something that can be done. So, what might be something that you could use it as an attack on your own? And that comes into where you could always give somebody the opposite. Give somebody -3 DCV, usable as an attack, usable by other. Why is it not giving me the attack as an attack? But what you're aiming at here is essentially you're giving the other person a -3 to their defensive combat value. You're making it easier for them to be hit. Or you can take it away from their OCV. And now they can't hit as well. And you can give them these negative combat skill levels. So it's kind of the reverse of what's above, although I probably would not allow -3. When you take into account that the average human being's OCV and DCV is 3, you just basically knocked out all of their ability with one power to legitimately hit anyone. Now they're a bumbling, fumbling idiot. Sorry about my asthmatic wheeze. But, at the same time, it does cost endurance to use this. And, there are legitimate uses for it. Good point. I may have been stepping on another power there, because there is change environment here, which allows you to change the environmental conditions within a certain radius. Let's say give it 16 inches radius and suddenly make it muddy ground and give them -1 to their DCV via the change environment. And look there, it costs the same amount. So Wundergoon is probably correct. I was treading on another power there, and you can even make it up to the -3. But now it costs 3 endurance. So I think Wundergoon was right. It was not usable as an attack because that becomes, you know, treading on the ground of change environment, though not entirely. There are some scenarios I can see where change environment would not be appropriate. And then, um, there are other things that I don't see available to be done here that I would allow within reason. Number one is I would allow to within reason you to give somebody else using usable by others unluck. Basically, you can make them unlucky. Now, you could do that with these other powers by simply giving them OCV and DCV penalties and things like that. So it may be that they're not available because, again, you're treading on somebody else's power, something else's little bailiwick there. But this pretty well covers legitimate uses for the advantage, as well as why it's a no-no, why it needs to be watched so carefully. And that did not take as long as I thought it would to talk about that one abusive ability there. But, so let's look at another one. Oh, why did that come back up? Oh, because I was up on change environment. Let's look at flight again, and let's add some modifiers. Here's a good one that won't take that long to go over. Mega scale. Okay. Now, mega scale changes the scale of the game inch. As I've mentioned, the game inch is referred to because the game is usually played on a battle grid of 1 inch diameter hexagonal little plots, instead of squares. Pardon. And so usually 1 game inch is equal to 2 meters. Well, megascale here, you can change it to 1 game inch equals 1 kilometer. Well, that's pretty handy. So now your 1 inch of teleportation allows you to teleport up to 1 kilometer away. And that starts getting into why, there's a stop sign out beside megascale. Now, you can increase that. For another quarter, it's now 1 game inch equals 10 kilometers, and so forth. You can just keep jacking it up. Now, the limiter on megascale is already that it can't be scaled down. Once you put megascale on a power, it is megascale. It will sit there, and always 1 game inch is 1 kilometer in this case, is why I have it up here. But you can put on an adder that makes it a little better disadvantage, where you can scale it down. Let's say you bought it up to, 1 game inch equals 10,000 kilometers. You could scale it down to 1 kilometer. 1 inch equals 1 kilometer. So it is possible to buy, where you can limit back and push back, because the minimum distance you can go is 1 game inch. So as it is, this would be 10,000 kilometers is the minimum you would be able to, what's the power we're looking at? The minimum you would be able to fly would be 10,000 kilometers. So zoom and off you go for 10,000 kilometers. All right. So that's why that is there, where you can scale it back down. But even so, you can't scale it down to that 2 meters. You still can't use this flight for a little local jaunt. But there should be an option. Nope, that's the best you can do. Okay, so the bottom line is you probably don't want all of your flight to be mega scale, and probably don't want that much of it to be mega scale. But there is a reason it's there, and is got a stop sign. Does have a stop sign, because the other point potential. Man, I'm having trouble talking tonight. The other potential um, point of contention is you can always put a naked advantage on there, and let's say you want an area of effect. Well, that's not how you do this. Dang it. Let's say you wanted area of effect on a power, but wanted it mega. Well, now they're not allowing me to do that. I'll have to. Should have researched this a little better. Um, the bottom line is you could theoretically put area effect on a power and then mega scale on the area of effect. So in other words, for not terribly many points, you could develop a power using mega scale that would affect the entire planet. That probably is not something you want to allow. Call me nutty. But area effect, unless it's a villain, because Dr. Destroyer, the main villain in the Champions universe, often comes up with a death ray that can destroy 90% of the population on Earth. So he might need megascale on an area of effect, but the heroes will almost never need megascale on an area of effect. Wonder Goon is again going, no, 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 no. I agree with him wholeheartedly. There's just certain things you should not allow, and that's what these stop signs are about. So let's look at, instead of an advantage, let's move on and keep this rolling. Why does summon have a stop sign beside it? Basically, summon does exactly what it says. Creature type, woodland animals. So you can summon up woodland animals. What level are they? This sets how many points they have, and as you can see, it's racking up. It's will cost you 1 character point per 5 character points in the animal. So let's go ahead and make this a badass deer. So you can now summon a 200-point woodland animal, and then I can do this times 2. So now I can summon 2 R4, R6, R8, R16, 32, 64, 128. And I'm still below Wonder Goon's active point limits, much less mine. And now I can summon 128 200-point deer. And that should make you be cringing, because I can sit here and also, because normally you have no control over the animals or the creature that is summoned. But as Wonder Goon is putting, this is instant army power. 128 of these things being summoned to the area, whether they're under my control or not, they're going to cause a lot of chaos and a lot of problems with, the combat scenario here, because there's 128 of them. It's instant army. It's probably not something you want to allow. And when you add in that they can be weak-willed, so -2 on their ego rolls, or -4, or even better. All right. And now I combine this with, well, that's now 128 active points. So let's lower that down. Let's put it back below. Okay, so 4 beings, but they're now weak-willed. And so I can control them. I'll also add in mind control with an animal type of mind. And we'll just make it, because it is animals, 10 die 6. And we'll put area of effect on that. Bam, bam, bam. And now, well, it's still 100 active points, so Wonder Goon isn't going to allow that. But there we go. Now it's under. And now I can control these critters because as they come within 6 meters of me having summoned them, I can now put them under my control. Wonder Goon put it exactly as it is. Summon allows someone to come up with an instant army, and it should therefore be carefully watched and monitored, possibly even disallowed. Just don't even allow it. But if you do allow it, it's something you need to watch. Then there's powers like here that are transforms. And again, transform at low levels doesn't seem that bad. For each dice 6 of transform, you roll the dice, you total it, and that's the amount of body damage you've done. And what you have to do is get enough total on the dice that you, if it were a killing attack, you would be taking the character to negative their body. So you have to do double their body in damage to transform them. All right. Well, there's cosmetic transform here. That's only 5 points per die. But for this, you're able to change their hair color. You're able to change their cheekbones a little bit where they're not quite so high or some prominent or something like that. Bottom line, you can do a little better than just a good disguise kit. All right. But then we get into minor transform. That's 10 points per die. And now you're starting to talk about I can change genders on a person, but they're still a person. I can change their natural hair color. I can change, well, that would be cosmetic, but you get the idea. It keeps within the same type of being, type of thing that you can transform. But, it's now up to you can actually make alterations of a significant form to them. And then there's major transform. Air into a table. Okay? This might not be something you want to allow. Giant monster to earthworm. Might not be something you want to allow, but it is perfectly within the realm and scope of a major transform. So this is why, you may want to watch this because you may sit there go, yeah, but it'd take a horrendous number of dice to get to regularly get double the amount of body. Except there's a nice little modifier on here, an advantage I can put on it. Where is it? I'm not seeing it right now, which probably means I need to look. Yeah, Wonder Goon goes superpowered person into non-superpowered person. So you take away somebody's powers permanently or seemingly permanently. So you can't put cumulative. Oh, transform is already cumulative in nature. So that makes it doubly dangerous. I thought you still had to put on the advantage cumulative on it if you wanted it to be cumulative. But you can just sit there and keep making attacks with this transform until you finally build up to enough body. So, yes, this has the potential, even at 1 die 6, of majorly transforming your campaign because your player can now render the bad guy powerless. Now, transform at its basic level does heal because there has to be a reasonably common thing that will reverse it. So, like a Medusa's gaze of turning people to stone, there would have to be, for that transform, there would have to be something that allows you to undo the spell. You also have to specify transform X into Y, person into statue, okay, and things like this. You can't just up and set anything and set it on the fly. Oh, I'm going to get a major transform because today I want to make just create a table out of thin air, but tomorrow I want to use it to change somebody into an earthworm. No, you cannot do that. But, or you can't without adding some more stop power advantages, and we'll save that for another discussion. The bottom line is transform, like any of these stop sign powers, is potentially game altering. It can really mess up your game when somebody is just simply able to sit there and eradicate something, your villain or whatever. Um, you know, it's just probably something you want to keep an eye out for. Then there's some innocuous powers like desolidification. Well, why would desolidification have a stop sign for it? Well, bottom line is because somebody who's desolid is now invulnerable to all powers unless they have the advantage on them affects desolid. Okay? So I would have to have this plus 1/2 advantage on my power to be able to affect somebody who's desolid. So they're now invulnerable. Well, good for them. Yes, except they also can't affect the solid world while they're desolid. So there are some trade-offs there, and desolidification has the potential to unbalance a game, but it's one of those stop sign powers that honestly you can relax a little bit. Somebody's going to have to get inventive and creative to try to really warp and twist it. Clairsentience, on the other hand, is the ability to use a sense at a distance, and that doesn't sound too bad, except you can use it to perceive into other dimensions, or you can use it to perceive into the past or the future. Retrocognition and precognition. And that's where the stop sign starts coming in. Well, seeing into the past wouldn't be bad, except I hope you're not planning on any mysteries. Because now they can peer back in time and see what happened here, see the nature of the murderer, see the identity of the murderer. So you probably, if you're planning on running any mysteries, probably want to watch that. And precognition is its own little bottle of joy. Wondergoon is chiming in again. Retrocognition is flat out disallowed in his games. And there's justifiable reason. Myself, I've allowed precognition. The bottom line is I've read too much Frank Herbert. And so in my games, two precognitives, two people who can see the future that come into conflict with each other, muddy the time stream up so that neither of them can actually see what's coming. If that's not the case, though, all precognition does is it gives you the ability it gives you a limitation you can put on some combat levels. Only if I can see the future. And things like this. So, or luck, only usable if I can see the future. Things like this. But it has the potential to be abusive and just difficult for the GM to run. So there's a stop sign out beside it. Now, if all they're wanting to do is clairsentience is a clairvoyance to be able to see, what's on the other side of this mount going on the other side of this mountain, or what's going on back at base. No. That's probably not so bad and probably should be allowed. But, this seeing into other dimensions, including time, might be a little, I don't want that. Same thing with extra dimensional movement. You want to talk about a really messed up power. Take stop sign extra dimensional movement, which allows you to move between dimensions, and now add on usable as an attack. I don't like you being here anymore. Zoop. Now I've sent you to another dimension. tunneling and leaving them buried in the earth is bad enough. Now they're in a whole other dimension. You know, come on. I'm not going to repeat what Wondergoon says on that one because it's another expletive deleted. But the bottom line is that probably should not be allowed. I mean, it only even costs 40 active points. So it's not that terribly expensive a power to send somebody to another dimension. Yeah, just watch what's going on because people will try to get these things past you. You know, there's a funny one I had thought of. Let's make an explosion too. So it's an explosive sending everybody in the radius of the explosion into another dimension. I'm laughing because it's absurd. It's an absurd idea, but it's well within the parameters of the game, and it's not against the rules. So that's something with this system that you have to watch out as a game master and really keep from happening, is really watch for crazy potentials like this. And that's why these stop signs are there. And I'm not going to get into the yield signs because, or any of the other stop sign advantages because that can be whole other things themselves. But I will bring it back up to show that there are several of them on the advantages. There are a few yield signs on some of the limitations because these are things that you just need to keep an eye out for. And on that note, I will ask for comments and questions from the Peanut Gallery, which Wondergoon has definitely not been quiet tonight because this is a topic near and dear to our hearts because we've been playing long enough. He's probably like me, seen some of these abusive things come up. And just like every now and then we get suckered with a non-abusive power. Like I said, Energy Blast. The standard attack power can be abused if you're not watching, if you're not paying attention. I mean, I retired a character once upon a time. It was in Wondergoon's campaign, and I retired him for not because he had any of these groundbreaking, earth-shaking powers, but because his PD and ED, his defenses had gotten up so high that in order to hurt my character, Wondergoon as a GM was having to throw villains at us that were utterly destroying any of the other characters just to hurt mine. And so it was unbalancing the game. Perfectly legal powers, no stop signs, no yield signs. It was just a matter that I had made an emphasis of the defenses on this character and ended up getting them to such a point that they were unbalancing the game. So I retired the character. I didn't have to be asked. I wasn't told you're retiring this character. I just saw what was going on as a player and said, this is making it where it's not fun for everybody. So sometimes you just have to, as a player, you need to be aware that sometimes you may need to do that. You may love this character. I love that character. Still love playing him when I get a chance. But sometimes you just got to say, you know what? You're right. This is unbalancing the game. I need to remove it. And you as a player can make that call too. Because sometimes you do something completely innocently. My character with his PD and ED and his recovery, it all played into making him where to do much to him, the GM had to throw horrendous villains at everybody else. So keep that type of thing in mind. The system is wonderful, but it can get out of hand. For the record, that character isn't out of bounds for the campaign he was in. You can bring him back if if I ever get a chance to run that game again. So there you have it. And if he ever gets a chance to run that game again, I may very well bring that character back in. If nothing else, for a little while as a team mentor, right? Because we'll have a new team from what I'm understanding. But anyway, the point remains things can get out of control with this system, can get out of hand. And so sometimes you and the GM just need to work together to decide, and it may end up that you need to set the character aside for a little while. But you know what? That's an opportunity. That's an opportunity to build a new character to have fun with. And I did just that. I've played since then a couple of characters that replaced that one that I had a lot of fun with. So, don't think that it's just a matter of trying to take away your fun. All right, it's trying to make sure everybody can have fun. So I'm going to delete these things. This stream got a little rambly, but the next few may do that because it's like I said, instead of concentrating on builds, I'm going to concentrate on these stop sign and yield sign powers and advantages and limitations. And next time I'll probably go into one of the other advantages since I've pretty much covered the powers now. And yep, summon, transform, desolid, clear sentience. We've got the powers, the stop powers covered. So we'll get into the other stop advantages next time, and then some of the yield sign stuff. All right. And Wondergoon says he had no questions, so I'm going to call it a night and stop rambling and muttering. And if you see this and have any questions, by all means, comment. I will try to answer. All right. All right. We're going to end the stream. Have a good one. Peace out.